Number Systems 8, working with scientific notation. Learning target 3, I can multiply and divide two numbers written in scientific notation. So this lesson, we're going to work with the multiplication and the division of two numbers written in scientific notation. So we're going to look at the steps and how to find the product. Remember, again, product is a multiplication problem of two numbers in scientific notation. Good news is, unlike adding and subtracting, we don't have to have a common exponent. So steps are a little bit less complicated in moving the mantissa decimal to the left or right and adding and subtracting. So the first step is we're going to rewrite, there's my verb, rewrite the equation with the mantissas together. Oops, I've got an S there. And the powers together. It was kind of like step 2 of adding and subtracting, except for we don't have to find commons. We're just going to go right ahead and put those mantissas together. So we'll go down here and do that example. So number 2, we're going to multiply the mantissas. Since this is a multiplication problem, we're going to multiply the mantissas. And step 3, we're going to add the exponents. So if you remember from NS8 LT3, when you're multiplying powers, you actually add the exponents. And then the fourth step is the exact same step as it was for adding and subtracting. Your verb here is we're going to check that your final answer is written in correct scientific notation. And then, of course, if not, you're going to adjust as needed. So going back to when you add and subtract, you're going to follow those same adjustments. If I go back here, we wrote it right here. So if you have to, at the end there, move your decimal to the left, you'll add to the exponent. And if you have to move your decimal to the right, you're going to subtract. So that adjusting of the mantissas will add or subtract within the exponents. So the first example here we're going to start with is 8 times 10 to the negative 4th, and we're going to multiply that times 3 times 10 to the negative 3rd. So when you're multiplying in scientific notation, the first thing you're going to do is multiply the mantissas. So we're going to take 8 times 3, and then we're going to also deal with the exponents. And the good news is when you are multiplying in scientific notation, you don't have to have the same exponent this time. So if we go back to our problem here, the mantissa, we're going to take 8 times 3, which is 24. And if you remember from NS7, when you're multiplying exponents with the same base, you just have to add the exponents. So in this case, it's going to look like 10, and we're going to add together negative 4 plus negative 3. So our next step would be 24, I'll leave the mantissa 24 right now, times 10 to the negative 7th. So let's review. First step, multiply the mantissas, which was 8 times 3. Next step, you're going to add the exponents because the bases are the same and you're multiplying. So we're going to add negative 4 plus negative 3 is negative 7. And the last step, as we've talked about before, is to make sure this final answer is in correct scientific notation. So if I look at my mantissa, which is going to determine that, 24 is not 1 or greater or less than 10. So I'm going to need to move this decimal to the left. And when I move to the left, that means I add my exponent, so -7 plus 1. So my correct number in scientific notation would be 2 4/10 times 10 to the -6. Next example, let's take 0.7 times 10 to the 11th and multiply that times 2/10 times 10 to the 4th. Step 1. Multiply the mantissa. So I'm going to write this out. And put the exponents together. We'll make that multiplication. And so then we take 7/10 times 2/10. That is 14 hundredths. I'm going to add these exponents because they have the same base of 10. So we have 0.14 times 10. And when we add 11 plus 4, that becomes 15. So if we look at it at the end here, we notice that 14 hundredths is definitely not greater than 1 or equal to 1 or less than 10. So this time we're going to move the decimal to the right. So it becomes 1.4 times 10. And when I move to the right, I actually subtract 1. So this becomes to the 14th power. Multiplication. Again, multiply the mantissas, add the exponents on the base of 10, and then make sure your final answer is in correct scientific notation. So the steps in dividing are very close to being the same, except for instead of this being a multiplication problem, this is a division. So how to find the quotient, which is the answer to a division problem. So we're going to look pretty much the same here. So first step, again, that verb is to rewrite the equation with the mantissas together. And the powers of the exponents together. Again, they don't have to be the same. So that's kind of a nice part of adding and subtracting. So it's kind of like when you, with multiplying and dividing. Kind of like when fractions, when you multiply and divide fractions, they don't have common denominators. So that's kind of that same concept here. Number 2, this is how it changes. We're going to divide the mantissas. So when we find the product, of course we multiply, but when we find the quotient, we're going to divide those mantissas. And then the next step, third step, is this is the second change here, we're going to subtract the exponents. So remember again from NS7, when you divide, you're going to, in exponential form, you're going to subtract those exponents. And the last and final step, it's the same when it's been for all of the adding, subtracting, multiplying, and now dividing. You're going to check to make sure your answers and final are correct scientific notation. And if not, of course, correct it. Is incorrect. Remember to adjust both the mantissa and the powers. So let's look at some examples. Our first example, we'll go 9 times 10 to the 12th power, and we're going to divide that by 3/10 times 10 to the 7th power. So the steps of division is that we're going to divide these lovely little mantissas. So technically we're going to take 9 divided by 3/10. And then we have 10 to the 12th times 10 to the 7th. divided by 10 to the 7th. So over here, we're going to divide. So 9 divided by 3/10 is 30. Times, now we got to go back into, again, NS7, and when we're dividing exponents with the same base, we probably looked at them more like this, if that confuses you less. And when we divide with exponents, remember, we subtract the powers. So in this case, it's 7 minus 12. So we have 30 as our mantissa. When we subtract here, we get 5 when we subtract 12 minus 7. And then we look at the end here. 30 is not between 1 and 10. So we're going to move the decimal over to the left. So it becomes 3.0 times, and we move something to the left, we actually add 1 to the exponent. So times 10 to the 6th power. Last example we're going to look at today is 24 times 10 to the 5th over 6 times 10 to the 9th. Again, we're dividing, which means we're going to divide the mantissas. This time I'll write it like this, see if it is easier for you to understand. So 24 divided by 6, we're going to take that 10 to the 5th divided by 10 to the 9th. So 24 divided by 6, you're going to divide your mantissas first, and that is the outcome, or the quotient, of 4. And then remember, you're going to subtract, so this would be 10 to the 5th minus 9. So we get 4 times 10 to the negative 4th. And then we look at this, and the good news is 4 is between 1 and 10, so our final answer is 4 times 10 to the negative 4th.